not some underlying unknown health condition. George Floyd was a healthy young man. We see in the video he was walking, breathing, he was alive. His cause of death medically was mechanical asphyxiation. The legal determination is homicide. That is it in a nutshell. The officers killed him based on a knee to his neck for almost 9 minutes and 2 knees on his back, compressing his lungs. The ambulance was his hearse. Next question.
From Audra Birch, what charges do you want for the additional 3 officers?
Attorney Ramanucci will take that question.
So in terms of criminal charges, there is no doubt that those police officers are criminally liable also. We will leave it up to Attorney General Ellison to be transparent, to be fair, to review the evidence in the totality of the circumstances. But I urge anyone who looks at that video and reviews the entire evidence that not only were constitutional violations abound here, but this was criminal. They knew that they were employing restraints that could or might cause death. And by having that knowledge and by continuing to mount the pressure on his body, restricting his airway and cutting off blood to his brain, they knew that they would cause death. To be culpable of murder or homicide, you only need to know that what you are doing could lead to death. They were trained, supposedly, that those restraints could or might cause death. They need to be charged criminally. They are criminally liable because they knew that what they were doing could lead to death. And indeed, we know that it did cause his death.
Raina S. from CARE.
Thank you, Attorney Ramanucci. And just to be clear, George Floyd's family wants first-degree murder for Officer Chauvin and the other officers to be charged to the full extent of the law because George was their blood. Imagine someone who is your family and during the last moments of his life on this earth, begging for humanity, begging to be treated like a human being, begging to be treated like one of God's children. They want a first-degree murder charge. They want equal justice for African Americans because Black Lives Matter and George Floyd life mattered.
Rena S. from CARE 11 News asks, do the doctors believe the information about underlying conditions? Oh, I apologize. Rena S. from CARE 11 News asks, and are the doctors basing the cause of death solely on the video and not the autopsy?
When looking at the case, the entire investigation, including the autopsy, are very important. The determination of cause and manner of death are based on the circumstances surrounding the death, which does include the video, but also additional findings that were determined at our autopsy. We do have physical evidence that supports that there was pressure applied to his neck. And it's in this combination with the additional medical information that we have, including examination of all of the other organs that were available to us in making our determination of cause of death.
And Dr. Barden, could you speak just to the physical abrasions to his head and face and how that contributed to your determinations?
Yes, as Dr. Wilson said, we take everything we have into consideration. The forensic autopsy starts at the scene. Much time in most homicide cases relates to reconstructing the scene. Detectives going out and interviewing people, all kinds of forensic science work, picking up trace evidence. In this instance, the video tells you what the scene is. The video is real. The multiple videos are real. And those multiple videos show pressure that can cause death, and his calling out, like Eric Garner, but also including calling out for his mother, who had been dead for 3 years. None of this caused a release of the pressure. And that is very disturbing. Now, what was the question? Thank you. There were rough abrasions around the left eye and the left cheek, and a little bit in the front of on the nose and mouth areas that are due, as we can see in the video, to the left side of his face being rubbed against the pavement, while the left knee of the officer is squeezing down on the left side of the neck, which would be, the neck is a small area with many vital organs, arteries, veins, nerves, and the windpipe, all of which are compressed with the knee activity as seen on the video. So that the abrasions on the side of the neck and the nose would also indicate that a component of the interference with breathing was also some pressures that were placed on the nose and mouth. And these are also very painful kinds of scrape marks. There was also severe scrape marks on the back of his left shoulder, which is part of the activity that was causing him to rub against his knee, the officer's knee, as well as the face being on the ground. And those occurred while he was still alive and breathing.
And is that evidence of pressure?
That is evidence of severe pressure on the face, large areas of scraping abrasions on the face, in particular, left side of the face, which is evidence of his face being rubbed severely against the ground.
What Dr. Bodden said is also very important for the prior question of the criminal charges, because what was happening on that video is extremely important, because when the brave young man that you're going to hear from tomorrow was trying to attempt life-saving statements to the police officers, or when George Floyd was calling out that he can't breathe or for his mother, you could see, at least from one of the angles, the first angle that was released, that Officer Chauvin was readjusting his knee in order to further compress that tight area of the neck. That is an expression of knowledge. That taunt of readjusting his knee in order to further compress the airway and hold him down with that sustained pressure is evidence of criminal conduct.
Liz Navratil from the Star Tribune asks the doctors if your autopsy found any evidence of the heart disease or other underlying conditions.
Dr. Barden or Dr. Wilson?
As I've mentioned previously, certain parts of the organs have been retained by the original pathologist. In the sections that we have and in the specimens that we examine, there is no significant underlying disease of the heart. The sections of the vessels that we examined were clear of atherosclerosis. The sections that have been retained. We will examine once they can be made available to us.
Thank you for clarifying that. for us, Dr.
I'd just like to add on in my coronavirus susceptible age group that I wish I had the same coronary arteries that Mr. Floyd had that we saw at the autopsy.
Thank you for putting that in context for us, Dr. Barden.
Yamichi at PBS NewsHour asks, can the doctors determine at this time how long it took Mr. Floyd to die?
Yeah. I counted the video from the time the video started, which was a few seconds apparently after Mr. Floyd was pushed on the ground and the knee put on the neck, counts about 3 minutes and 50 seconds between the time he's on the ground and the time he becomes motionless, at a time when the passers-by, the civilians who were watching and photographing, yelled out that he was dying, that he was lifeless, that he should be permitted to get up, that he's dying, that he's going to be dead. From the moment, 3 minutes and plus seconds, he was motionless. He had no evidence of breathing, of struggling, and remained that way for another 4 or 5 minutes with the knee on his neck until the EMS people arrived and found he had no pulse, he had a cardiac arrest. They tried CPR, they tried shock to the heart, nothing worked, and he did not recover. In my opinion, he died. He was dead after about 4 or 5 minutes. He was pronounced dead sometime later when he gets to a hospital. A person's alive in this country until a proper physician, usually a physician, pronounces him dead. But he appears to be dead before the EMT people get there, certainly.
And it's important to note the two EMT. It's important to note that the two EMT members, once they got to the scene, they had Lucas' device working on an unresponsive, pulseless male. They concluded in the ambulance, they performed pulse checks several times, finding none, and delivered one shock by their monitor. The patient's condition did not change. He remained unresponsive and pulseless. And that's why I said the ambulance that we see arrive on the scene was George Wilson's hearse. The ambulance that we see arrive on the scene was George Floyd's hearse.
Question from Andrew Tangle from the Wall Street Journal. Do the medical examiner's results differ in professional opinion from the county medical examiner, or is that information you don't have yet?
At this time, we have not had the opportunity to review the actual preliminary report from the medical examiner who performed the autopsy. We have seen accounts from the complaint, and based on that, yes, our findings do differ. Some of the information I read from that complaint state that there was no evidence of traumatic asphyxia. This is the point in which we do disagree, that there is evidence in this case of mechanical or traumatic asphyxia.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson, for explaining that. Next question. Oh, Dr. Bobby. Okay. If you could speak louder with the questions. Okay. So we have 5 minutes left.
There are no further questions.
Okay. Thank you all. We will continue to keep you informed as we continue to move forward to getting justice for George Floyd. Thank you and God bless. And let's remember to take a breath, America. Let's take a breath for George. Let's take a breath for peace. Let's take a breath for justice. And let's take a breath to heal our country. Thank you.